Welcome to Occult Mysticism, where ancient secrets unfold. Today we dive into the astral plane, its scenery, inhabitants, and phenomena by C.W. Leadbeater, a captivating exploration of the unseen realm beyond our physical world. Join us as we uncover its mysteries, from astral inhabitants to cosmic phenomena, and embark on a journey into theosophical wisdom. Subscribe for more esoteric insights. The Astral Plane, its scenery, inhabitants, and phenomena by C.W. Leadbeater offers a fascinating journey into a realm unseen by most, yet constantly interacting with our physical world. This book, part of a series of theosophical manuals, aims to demystify the astral plane, which has often been shrouded in abstruse and technical language. It seeks to provide a clear and accessible exposition of theosophical teachings for the everyday reader, with the hope that it might inspire some to delve deeper into its profound philosophy, science, and religion. Leadbeater emphasizes that theosophy is not exclusively for scholars, but for everyone, offering great truths that can make life easier to bear and death less daunting to face. Introduction to the Astral Plane. The astral plane, or Kamaloka as it is known in Sanskrit, has been a recurring theme in theosophical writings, with scattered information available across various texts. Leadbeater's primary objective in this manual is to consolidate and organize this dispersed knowledge, supplementing it with new insights derived from the investigations of a select group of explorers. He clarifies that these editions are not presented as authoritative pronouncements, but rather as findings from diligent research. Every precaution has been taken to ensure accuracy, with no fact, whether new or old, being included unless corroborated by at least two independent, trained investigators and validated by more experienced students. The author expresses confidence that this account, though not exhaustive, offers a reliable understanding of the astral plane. A crucial point Leadbeater stresses is the absolute reality of the astral plane. He is not speaking from a metaphysical perspective where only the unmanifested one is real due to its impermanence. Instead, he uses reality in its common everyday sense, asserting that astral objects and inhabitants are as tangible as our physical bodies, furniture, houses, or monuments. While they are not eternal, they are nonetheless realities from our human perspective during their existence, and their presence cannot be ignored simply because the majority of humanity remains largely unaware of them. Leadbeater addresses a common misconception among even theosophical students regarding the reality of various planes of the universe. This misunderstanding, he suggests, may stem from the loose use of the word plane in some literature, leading to the erroneous belief that information on this subject is inexact or merely speculative. He insists that a clear understanding of the wisdom religion necessitates an intellectual grasp of the fact that our solar system comprises distinct planes, each with its own matter of varying densities. These planes, he explains, can be visited and observed by those who have adequately prepared themselves, much like exploring a foreign country. By comparing the observations of individuals who consistently work on these planes, evidence of their existence and nature can be obtained, as satisfactory as the evidence most of us have for the existence of places like Greenland or Spitsbergen. The planes, listed in order of increasing materiality from the densest to the finest, are the physical, astral, devachanic, sushuptic, and nirvanic, with two even higher planes beyond our current comprehension. The matter of each plane differs from the one below it in a manner far greater than vapor differs from a solid, and what we perceive as solid, liquid, and gaseous states are merely the three lowest subdivisions of matter belonging to the physical plane itself. The astral region, the subject of this manual, is the second of these great planes, situated immediately above or within our familiar physical world. It has frequently been labeled the realm of illusion, not because it is inherently more illusory than the physical world, but due to the extreme unreliability of impressions gathered by untrained seers. This unreliability is attributed to two key characteristics. First, many astral inhabitants possess a remarkable ability to rapidly change their forms and cast significant glamour over those they choose to sport with. And, second, astral sight is a faculty vastly different from and more expansive than physical vision. An object on the astral plane is perceived from all sides simultaneously, with its interior as plainly visible as its exterior. This naturally presents considerable difficulty for an inexperienced visitor in comprehending what they truly see, and even greater challenges in translating that vision into the limited vocabulary of ordinary speech. A common error, for instance, is the frequent reversal of numbers read from the astral light, so that 139 might be perceived as 931. However, for an occult student trained by a capable master, such mistakes are improbable, save for extreme haste or carelessness. These pupils undergo extensive instruction in accurate astral seeing, with masters or more advanced students repeatedly presenting them with various illusions and correcting their interpretations until they achieve certainty and confidence in navigating astral phenomena, far exceeding what is possible in physical life. The training extends beyond mere seeing. It includes the crucial ability to accurately translate memories between planes, aided by the development of unbroken consciousness from the physical to the astral or devachanic planes and back again. This ensures that recollections are not lost or distorted during transitional blank intervals. Once this power is mastered, the pupil gains access to all astral faculties, not only during sleep or trance, but also while fully awake in ordinary physical life. Leadbeater challenges the dismissive attitude some theosophists hold towards the astral plane, deeming it unworthy of attention. While acknowledging that the ultimate goal is the purely spiritual plane, and that neglecting higher development for astral consciousness would be disastrous, he points out that for some, their karma allows them to prioritize spiritual faculties, seemingly overleaping the astral plane for a time. When such individuals later encounter the astral plane, their perfected spiritual insight and strength provide an immense advantage, enabling them to comprehend it from a higher perspective without deception or resistance. However, this is not the sole or even the typical method employed by the masters of wisdom with their pupils. For most, progress is a slow, step-by-step process, and since the astral plane is immediately adjacent to our denser physical world, it is usually where initial superphysical experiences occur. Therefore, for beginners in these studies, a clear understanding of its mysteries is highly valuable. It not only elucidates phenomena observed in seance rooms and haunted houses, but also provides a means of safeguarding oneself and others from potential dangers. First encounters with this remarkable region manifest in diverse ways. Some individuals, under unusual influences, may experience a singular moment of sensitivity, recognizing an astral inhabitant, only to later dismiss it as hallucination due to the lack of repetition. Others progressively find themselves seeing and hearing things invisible and inaudible to those around them. Perhaps most commonly, people begin to recall with increasing clarity their experiences on the astral plane during sleep. Students of these subjects may cultivate astral sight through practices like crystal gazing. Those privileged with the direct guidance of a qualified teacher are typically introduced to the astral plane under special protection, which continues until their teacher is satisfied, through various tests, that the pupil is resilient against any danger or terror. Regardless of the manner of awakening, the initial realization of being constantly surrounded by a vast, active world, of which most are entirely unconscious, inevitably marks a memorable epoch in a person's existence. The sheer abundance and diversity of life on the astral plane are initially overwhelming for a neophyte, and even for seasoned investigators, classification remains a challenge. Leadbeater likens it to an explorer of an unknown tropical forest being asked to detail not only the geography and natural resources, but also the genus and species of every insect, bird, beast, and reptile. Yet, even this analogy falls short, as psychic investigators face the added complexities of accurately translating recollections from the astral plane to the physical, and the utter inadequacy of ordinary language to express much of what they observe. However, just as a physical explorer would begin with a general description of scenery, so too will this sketch of the astral plane commence by attempting to convey its ever-changing and marvelous backdrop. This endeavor, however, faces an almost insurmountable initial difficulty due to the extreme complexity of the matter. Those with full astral sight agree that describing this scenery to those whose eyes remain unopened is akin to explaining the exquisite variety of sunset hues to a blind person. No matter how detailed the description, there is no guarantee that the listener will form an adequate representation of the truth. Scenery of the astral plane. The astral plane is comprised of 7 subdivisions, each possessing a corresponding degree of materiality and a distinct condition of matter. These subdivisions, numbered from the highest and least material downwards, naturally group into 3 classes. Divisions 1, 2, and 3 form one class, 4, 5, and 6 another, and the 7th, lowest division stands alone. The difference in matter between these classes is comparable to that between a solid and a liquid, while the difference between subdivisions within a class resembles that between two types of solids, such as steel and sand. Setting aside the seventh division for a moment, Divisions 4, 5, and 6 of the astral plane utilize our familiar physical world and its accessories as their background. Life on the sixth division is simply our ordinary earthly existence, but without the physical body and its necessities. As one ascends through the fifth and fourth divisions, life becomes progressively less material, withdrawing more and more from our lower world and its concerns. While the scenery of these lower divisions reflects the earth as we know it, it is simultaneously much more. Viewed from this different vantage point with the aid of astral senses, even purely physical objects take on a markedly different appearance. For an individual with fully opened eyes, objects are seen not from a single viewpoint, but from all sides at once, an inherently confusing concept. Adding to this complexity is the fact that every particle within a solid body is as fully and clearly visible as those on the outside. Under such conditions, even the most familiar objects can initially be completely unrecognizable. Yet, upon reflection, such vision more closely approximates true perception than physical sight. For instance, a glass cube on the astral plane would appear with all sides equal, as they truly are, whereas on the physical plane, we perceive the farther side in perspective, an illusion that makes it appear smaller. This characteristic of astral vision has led to its description as sight in the fourth dimension, a highly suggestive and expressive phrase. Beyond these potential sources of misinterpretation, matters are further complicated by astral sight's ability to cognize forms of matter that, despite being purely physical, are ordinarily invisible. Examples include atmospheric particles, emanations from all living things, and 4 grades of an even finer order of physical matter, collectively termed etheric, for lack of more specific names. These etheric forms constitute a system unto themselves, freely interpenetrating all other physical matter. Investigating their vibrations and how higher forces affect them would present a vast and deeply engaging field of study for any scientist possessing the necessary sight. Even with a full imaginative grasp of the above, we still only comprehend a fraction of the problem's complexity. Beyond these new forms of physical matter, we must also contend with the even more numerous and perplexing subdivisions of astral matter. Every material object, even a single particle, possesses an astral counterpart. This counterpart is not a simple entity, but is typically highly intricate, composed of various types of astral matter. Furthermore, every living creature is enveloped by its own atmosphere known as its aura, which in humans forms a particularly captivating area of study. The aura appears as an oval mass of luminous mist, intricately structured, sometimes referred to as the auric egg, due to its shape. Theosophical readers will be pleased to know that even at the early stage of development where a pupil acquires astral sight, direct observation confirms the accuracy of Madame Blavatsky's teachings regarding at least some of the 7 principles of man. When viewing a fellow human, the astral seer no longer perceives only their outer appearance. Exactly coextensive with the physical body, the etheric double, traditionally known as the Linga Shara in theosophical literature, is clearly distinguishable. The jiva, as it is absorbed and specialized into prana, circulating as rosy light throughout the body and eventually radiating from a healthy person in its altered form, is also perfectly evident. Perhaps the most brilliant and easily seen, though belonging to a different order of matter, the astral, is the kamic aura. This aura expresses, through its vivid and constantly shifting colors, the desires that traverse the individual's mind moment by moment. This is the true astral body. Behind it, composed of a finer grade of matter, that of the rupa levels of Devachan, lies the devachanic body or aura of the lower manas. Its colors change slowly as the person progresses through life, indicating their disposition and character. Still higher and infinitely more beautiful, where clearly developed, is the living light of the Karana Shara, the aura or vehicle of the higher manas, which reveals the developmental stage of the true ego across its successive births. However, perceiving these higher auras requires more than mere astral vision. Leadbeater advises students to immediately regard these auras not as mere emanations, but as the actual manifestations of the ego on their respective planes. He emphasizes that the auric egg is the true man, not the physical body which crystallizes within it on this plane. As long as the reincarnating ego remains on its true home plane, the Aropa levels of Devachan, it inhabits the Karana Shara. Upon descending into the Rupa levels, to function there, it must clothe itself in their matter, which then forms its Devachanic or mind body. Similarly, when descending to the astral plane, it forms its astral or kamic body from astral matter, while retaining all its other bodies. Finally, upon further descent to the lowest plane, the physical body is formed within the auric egg, which thus contains the entire man. Fuller details on these auras can be found in London Lodge's Transaction, No. 18 and a previous article by Leadbeater in the Theosophist. Given that all these auras occupy the same space, interpenetrating the physical health aura, with the finer interpenetrating the grosser, careful study and extensive practice are necessary for a neophyte to clearly distinguish one from another at a glance. Nevertheless, the human aura, or often just a part of it, is frequently one of the first purely astral objects perceived by the untrained, though its indications are naturally prone to misunderstanding in such cases. Although the kamic aura with its brilliant color flashes may be more conspicuous, the nerve ether and the etheric double are actually composed of much denser matter, strictly speaking within the physical plane, despite being invisible to ordinary sight. Theosophical literature traditionally described the Linga Shara as the astral counterpart of the human body, with astral generally encompassing anything beyond physical senses. However, as closer investigation allows for more precise terminology, much of this invisible matter is recognized as purely physical. Consequently, the Linga Shara is now defined as the etheric double. This name is deemed appropriate as it consists of various grades of matter that scientists call ether, which upon examination is found not to be a separate substance but a finer subdivision of matter than the gaseous state, to which any physical matter can be reduced by applying appropriate forces. The term etheric double will therefore be used in future theosophical writings instead of Linga Shara, providing an English name indicative of the body's character and avoiding misunderstandings arising from the different signification of Linga Shara in Oriental texts. This change in nomenclature does not introduce a new concept, but rather aims for greater accuracy in labeling existing facts of nature. Examining the body of a newborn child with psychic faculty reveals its permeation by astral matter of every density, as well as by various grades of etheric matter. Tracing these inner bodies back to their origin shows that the etheric double, the mold upon which the physical body is constructed, is formed by the agents of the lords of karma from etheric matter. The astral matter, on the other hand, is automatically gathered by the descending ego as it passes through the astral plane. The etheric double must incorporate all different grades of etheric matter, though proportions vary based on race, subrace, human type, and individual karma. Given that these four subdivisions of matter consist of numerous combinations forming aggregations that compose the atom of a chemist's element, this second principle of man is highly complex, with practically infinite possible variations. This allows the Leadbeater to create a mold that precisely suits even the most intricate and unusual karma. Another notable aspect of physical matter when viewed from the astral plane is that astral vision possesses the ability to magnify the tiniest physical particle to any desired size, akin to a microscope, but with vastly greater power. Thus, the hypothetical molecules and atoms of science are visible realities to the occult student, though the latter perceives them as far more complex than currently understood by science. This represents an extensive and fascinating field of study. The scientific investigator who perfected this astral sight would not only greatly facilitate experiments with known phenomena, but also unlock entirely new realms of knowledge, requiring more than a lifetime for thorough examination. For example, the development of this vision would reveal the existence of additional, entirely different colors beyond the visible spectrum, with ultra-red and ultraviolet rays, discovered by science through other means, being plainly perceptible to astral sight. Leadbeater returns to the general appearance of the astral plane, emphasizing that while ordinary physical world objects form the background on certain levels, the profound increase in understanding their true nature and characteristics results in a widely different overall effect. Taking a rock as a simple example, with trained vision, it is not a mere inert mass of stone. First, the entire physical matter of the rock is seen, not just a small part. Second, the vibrations of its physical particles are perceptible. Third, it possesses an astral counterpart, composed of various grades of astral matter, whose particles are also in constant motion. Fourth, the jiva or universal life is observed circulating through and radiating from it. Fifth, an aura, though less extensive and varied than in higher kingdoms, surrounds it. Sixth, its appropriate elemental essence permeates it, constantly active yet fluctuating. In the vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms, the complexities are naturally far more numerous. Some readers might object that psychics who occasionally glimpse the astral world, or entities manifesting at seances, do not describe such complexities. Leadbeater explains this by stating that few untrained individuals on that plane, whether living or deceased, perceive things as they truly are without extensive experience. Even those who do see fully are often too dazed or confused to comprehend or remember. Among the very small minority who both see and remember, hardly any can translate their recollections into physical language. Many untrained psychics do not scientifically examine their visions. They simply obtain an impression that may be accurate, partially false, or entirely misleading. The latter becomes more probable when considering the frequent tricks played by sportive astral denizens, against which untrained individuals are usually defenseless. Furthermore, regular astral inhabitants, whether human or elemental, are ordinarily conscious only of astral objects, with physical matter being as invisible to them as astral matter is to most humans. While every physical object has an astral counterpart visible to them, the distinction is crucial for a symmetrical understanding of the subject. However, if an astral entity consistently works through a medium, its finer astral senses may gradually coarsen, becoming insensible to higher grades of matter on their own plane and instead perceiving the physical world as we do. Only a trained visitor from this life, fully conscious on both planes, can reliably see both clearly and simultaneously. Thus, Leadbeater stresses that complexity exists, and only through full perception and scientific unraveling can one achieve complete security against deception or error. For the seventh, or lowest, subdivision of the astral plane, our physical world can still be considered the background, though what is perceived is a distorted and partial view, as all that is light, good, and beautiful appears invisible. An Egyptian papyrus of the scribe Ani, written 4,000 years ago, describes it as a place without water or air, deep, unfathomable, black as the blackest night, where people wander helplessly and cannot live in peace. For unfortunate entities on this level, it is indeed true that all the earth is full of darkness and cruel habitations, but this darkness emanates from within themselves, consigning them to a perpetual night of evil and horror, a very real hell, albeit one entirely of their own making. Most students find investigating this section extremely unpleasant due to a sense of density and gross materiality that is indescribably loathsome to the liberated astral body, making it feel as if it's pushing through a black, viscous fluid. The inhabitants and influences encountered there are also typically exceedingly undesirable. The first, second, and third subdivisions of the astral plane appear much further removed from the physical world and are correspondingly less material. Entities inhabiting these levels lose sight of the earth and its possessions. They are usually deeply self-absorbed and, to a large extent, create their own surroundings. These surroundings are not purely subjective, as in Devachan, but are sufficiently objective to be perceptible to other entities and to clairvoyant vision. This region is undoubtedly the Summerland, frequently mentioned in spiritualistic seances, and the entities who describe it are likely speaking truthfully within the limits of their knowledge. On these planes, spirits temporarily call into existence their houses, schools, and cities. These objects are often real enough for a time, though to a clearer sight, they may sometimes be pitiably unlike what their delighted creators imagine them to be. Nevertheless, many of the forms created by imagination there possess genuine, though temporary, beauty. A visitor unaware of higher planes might contentedly wander among forests, mountains, lovely lakes, and pleasant flower gardens, or even construct such surroundings to suit their own fancies. Communication on the astral plane is limited by the entity's knowledge, similar to the physical plane. While a person capable of functioning freely on the astral plane can communicate with any human entity present there more easily and rapidly than on Earth, through mental impressions, the inhabitants themselves typically do not seem to exercise this power. They appear to be restricted by limitations akin to those on Earth, though perhaps less rigid. As a result, they are found associating in groups drawn together by common sympathies, beliefs, and language. A complete description of the astral plane's scenery would be incomplete without mentioning the records of the astral light. These records are a photographic representation of all past events, permanently impressed upon the higher medium known as the akasha. They are only reflected in a more or less spasmodic manner in the astral light, meaning that an individual whose vision does not transcend this plane will likely obtain only occasional and disconnected glimpses of the past rather than a coherent narrative. Nevertheless, images of all kinds of past events are constantly reproduced on the astral plane, forming a significant part of the investigator's surroundings there. Inhabitants of the astral plane. Having outlined the scenery, the next task is to describe the inhabitants of the astral plane. The immense variety of these entities makes their arrangement and tabulation exceedingly difficult. The most convenient approach is to categorize them into three primary classes: human, non-human, and artificial. Human inhabitants. Human denizens of Kamaloka are naturally divided into two groups, the living and the dead, or more precisely, those who still possess a physical body and those who do not. Living human beings, entities manifesting on the astral plane during physical life, can be further subdivided into four classes. The adept, or chila in the Maya Virupa. This is an artificial vehicle utilized on the four lower, or rupa, divisions of the devachanic plane by those capable of functioning there during their earthly life. It is formed from the substance of the mind body. Initially, a pupil cannot construct this body independently and must use their ordinary astral body, composed of the less refined matter of the kamic aura. However, at a certain stage of progress, the master himself forms the Maya Virupa for the first time, subsequently instructing and assisting the pupil until they can create it easily and quickly. Once this facility is achieved, this vehicle is routinely used in place of the coarser astral body, as it allows for instant passage between the astral and devachanic planes at will, and permits the continuous use of the higher powers belonging to its own plane. It is important to note that an individual traveling in the Maya Virupa is not perceptible to merely astral vision unless they choose to become so by gathering astral matter around them, thereby creating a temporary body suitable for that plane. Such a temporary creation would resemble an ordinary astral body only as a materialization resembles a physical body. In both instances, it is a manifestation of a higher entity on a lower plane to make itself visible to those whose senses cannot yet transcend that plane. Whether in the Maya Virupa or the astral body, a pupil guided by a competent teacher on the astral plane maintains full consciousness and is essentially themselves, as known by their friends on Earth, lacking only the four lower principles in the former case or the three lower in the latter. They gain additional powers and faculties of this higher state, enabling them to conduct theosophical work during sleep more easily and efficiently than in the physical body. Full and accurate memory on the physical plane of their astral activities depends largely on their ability to maintain unbroken consciousness between the two states. The psychically developed person, not under a master's guidance, such an individual may or may not be spiritually developed, as these two forms of advancement do not necessarily coincide. Psychic powers at birth are simply the result of efforts made in a previous incarnation, which could have been noble, unselfish, ignorant, misguided, or even entirely unworthy. While usually perfectly conscious when out of the body, they are susceptible to significant deception due to a lack of proper training. They can often traverse the different subdivisions of the astral plane almost as extensively as those in the previous class, though sometimes they are particularly drawn to one specific division and rarely venture beyond its influences. Their recollection of what they have seen can range from perfect clarity to utter distortion or complete oblivion, depending on their level of development. They invariably appear in their astral body, as by definition, they lack the knowledge to form the Maya Virupa. The ordinary person, without psychic development, this individual floats about in their astral body in a more or less unconscious state. During deep slumber, the higher principles, in their astral vehicle, almost always withdraw from the physical body and hover in its immediate vicinity, nearly as dormant as the body itself. In some instances, however, this astral vehicle is less lethargic, drifting dreamily on various astral currents, occasionally recognizing others in a similar condition, and encountering diverse experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant. The confused and often grotesquely distorted memory of these experiences might lead the person to recall them as a remarkable dream the next morning. These extruded astral bodies are almost shapeless and very indefinite in outline in less developed individuals and races. However, as intellect and spirituality evolve, the floating astral body becomes more defined and closely resembles its physical counterpart. Given that human psychic faculties are undergoing evolution, with individuals at various stages of development, this class naturally merges imperceptibly into the former one. The Black Magician or their pupil, this class closely parallels the first, but with development directed towards evil rather than good, and acquired powers used for purely selfish ends instead of for humanity's benefit. Lower ranks include practitioners of Oba or voodoo among certain African communities and medicine men of many savage tribes. Intellectually superior and thus more culpable are the Tibetan Black Magicians, often incorrectly termed Dugpas by Europeans. Leadbeater clarifies that Dugpas properly refers to a Bhotanese subdivision of the Kagyu sect, part of the semi-reformed school of Tibetan Buddhism, while the true unreformed red-hatted sect is the Ninmapa with the Bonpa, votaries of the Aboriginal religion lying even deeper in darkness, having never adopted any form of Buddhism. While Dugpas engage significantly in tantric magic, it is not implied that all non-Gelugpa Tibetan sects are inherently evil. Rather, their less strict rules might attract a greater proportion of self-seekers. Investigators on the astral plane may occasionally encounter occult students from various lodges worldwide, unconnected with Theosophists' masters, many of whom are earnest and self-sacrificing seekers of truth. It is noteworthy that all such lodges are at least aware of the Great Himalayan Brotherhood and acknowledge its members as containing the highest adepts on earth. Dead human beings, the term dead, is a misnomer. As most entities in this category are as fully alive as ourselves, it simply denotes those temporarily unattached to a physical body. They are further subdivided into 9 principal classes. The Nirmanakaya. This class is mentioned for completeness, though such exalted beings rarely manifest on a plane as low as the astral. When their sublime work necessitates it, they would likely create a temporary astral body, similar to an adept in the Maya Virupa, as their more refined vesture would be invisible to astral sight. Further information on Nirmanakayas can be found in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophical Glossary and The Voice of the Silence. The Chela awaiting reincarnation. Theosophical literature often states that, at a certain stage, with a master's assistance, a pupil can circumvent the natural law that typically draws a human being into Devachan after death to receive the full fruition of spiritual forces generated by their highest aspirations on earth. Given that a pupil is, by definition, a person of pure life and elevated thought, their spiritual forces would likely be exceptionally strong, leading to an extremely long Devachan if they were to take their Devachan. However, if they choose the path of renunciation emulating the great master Gautama Buddha, they can channel this reserve force for the benefit of humanity, thereby contributing, however infinitesimally, to the grand work of the Nirmanakayas. This choice sacrifices centuries of intense bliss, but offers the immense advantage of uninterrupted work and progress. When such a pupil dies, they simply step out of their body, as they have often done before, and await a suitable reincarnation arranged by their master on the astral plane. This departure from normal procedure requires permission from a very high authority. Even with permission, the force of natural law is so potent that the pupil must strictly confine themselves to Kamaloka during this period. Even a momentary touch of the Devachanic plane could sweep them back into the normal evolutionary current. In rare cases, they may avoid rebirth by directly inhabiting an adult body whose previous occupant no longer needs it, though suitable bodies are infrequent. More often, they await a fitting birth on the astral plane. During this waiting period, they lose no time, remaining fully conscious and continuing their master's work more quickly and efficiently than in a physical body, as they are no longer hindered by fatigue. Their consciousness is complete, and they traverse all divisions of Kamaloka with ease. While not common, chelas awaiting reincarnation are occasionally encountered on the astral plane, thus warranting their inclusion in this classification. As humanity evolves and more individuals embark on the path of holiness, this class is expected to grow. The ordinary person after death, this is by far the largest class, encompassing millions of individuals whose characteristics and conditions vary widely. The duration of their astral life also varies greatly, from a few days or hours to many years, even centuries. A person who has lived a good and pure life, with unselfish and spiritual aspirations, will feel little attraction to this plane. If undisturbed, they will find little to keep them there or to awaken them into activity during their relatively short stay. After death, The true self withdraws inward, shedding the physical body, and almost immediately the etheric double and prana. The intention is for them to also shed the astral or kamic body as soon as possible and enter the devachanic state, where their spiritual aspirations can fully manifest. The noble and pure-minded achieve this by having subdued earthly passions during life, directing their will into higher channels, leaving little lower desire energy to be worked out in Kamaloka. Their stay there will be brief, likely involving little more than a dreamy half-consciousness before sinking into the sleep that liberates their higher principles from the kamic envelope into the blissful rest of Devachan. For the average person not yet on the path of occult development, the ideal described above is not typically attained. The average individual has not freed themselves from lower desires before death, necessitating a prolonged period of more or less conscious life on the astral plane for these forces to dissipate, thereby releasing the higher ego. The body inhabited during this period is the Kamarupa, a rearrangement of the astral body's matter, but with a more defined outline. A key distinction is that while the astral body, if sufficiently awakened during life, could visit most or all astral subdivisions, the Kamarupa is strictly confined to the level to which its affinities draw it. However, it experiences a form of progress. The forces generated during Earth life often require working out across multiple Kamalika divisions. In such cases, a regular sequence is observed, starting with the lowest. As the Kamaripa exhausts its attractions to one level, its coarser particles fall away, and it aligns with a somewhat higher state of existence. Its specific gravity, as it were, continually decreases, causing it to steadily rise through denser to lighter strata, pausing only when perfectly balanced for a time. This explains the frequent remark at seances by entities that they are about to ascend to a higher sphere from which communication through a medium will be difficult or impossible. Indeed, a person on the highest astral subdivision would find it almost impossible to interact with an ordinary medium. The definiteness of outline distinguishing the Kamarupa from the astral body is different from the definiteness that indicates progress in the living man's astral body. There is no possibility of confusing the two because in a living person, astral particles are inextricably mingled and constantly shifting, whereas after death, their activity is more circumscribed, sorting themselves by materiality into a series of surrounding sheaths or shells, with the grossest outer layers dissipating first. The extent of this dissipation depends on the power of manas to free itself from connection with a given level, and this also determines the nature of the shade, which will be discussed later. The poetic notion of death as a universal equalizer is a misconception. In the vast majority of cases, the loss of the physical body does not alter a person's character or intellect, meaning there are as many varieties of intelligence among the dead as among the living. Western popular religious teachings on post-mortem adventures have been so wildly inaccurate that intelligent people are often bewildered upon recovering consciousness in Kamaloka after death. The stark difference between reality and their expectations often leads them to initially refuse to believe they have died. Our much-touted belief in soul immortality is of little practical value, as most people interpret continued consciousness as proof they haven't died. The doctrine of eternal punishment causes immense, needless terror among new arrivals in Kamaloka, who often endure prolonged mental suffering before shedding the influence of this hideous blasphemy and realizing that the world operates under a benevolent law of evolution, not the caprice of a demon. Many in this class never truly grasped this fact, drifting through their astral interlude as aimlessly as they lived their physical lives. Thus, in Kamaloka, as on Earth, a few comprehend their situation and make the best of it, while the majority lack this knowledge and are rarely open to the advice or example of the wise. Regardless of an entity's intellect, it is always fluctuating and generally diminishing. The lower manas is pulled in opposite directions by the higher triad from above and the kama from below, causing it to oscillate between these attractions, with an increasing tendency towards the former as kamic forces exhaust themselves. This is where the harm of spirit development, through a medium, as practiced at seances, comes in. This process intensifies the downward pull of kama, awakening the lower, accessible portion of the entity from its natural and desirable unconsciousness, thereby unnaturally prolonging its existence in Kamaloka. The peculiar danger lies in the fact that the real man is steadily withdrawing inward, becoming less able to influence or guide this lower portion, which nevertheless retains the power to generate karma until the separation is complete. Under these circumstances, it is far more likely to add evil than good to its record. The harm is threefold. First, delayed separation of manas and kama, wasting time and prolonging the interval between incarnations. Second, the near certainty of a large addition to the individual's negative karma to be worked out in future births. And third, the terrible danger that this abnormal intensification of kama may inextricably entangle the entire lower manas, leading to the complete loss of an incarnation. While such a catastrophic outcome is uncommon, it has occurred. In many cases where the evil falls short of this ultimate possibility, the individual still loses more of their lower manas through this entanglement with kama than they would have if left to withdraw naturally. While some good may occasionally be done to degraded entities at spiritualistic circles, nature intends such assistance to be provided by occult students who can visit the astral plane during Earth life, trained by competent teachers to address various cases effectively. This organized help, with its possibility of immediate consultation with higher authorities, is infinitely safer than casual assistance through a medium who is generally ignorant of spiritual evolutionary laws and vulnerable to evil or mischievous influences. Beyond mediumistic development, another, more frequent influence can significantly hinder a disembodied entity's journey to devachan, the intense and uncontrolled grief of surviving friends or relatives. Our inaccurate and even irreligious Western views on death cause us immense, unnecessary pain during temporary partings and often seriously harm those for whom we feel deep affection through this very grief. As one writer noted, when a departed brother is peacefully entering pre-devachanic unconsciousness, passionate sorrow and desires of friends left on earth can cause an awakening. These emotions violently vibrate the kamic elements in the living, setting up vibrations in the disembodied kamarupa, which then reach and rouse the lower manas before its withdrawal and reunion with the spiritual intelligence. This awakening often entails acute suffering, and even if pain is avoided, the natural process of the triad's liberation is rudely disturbed and delayed. It would be beneficial if those whose loved ones have passed on would learn to restrain grief for their sake, recognizing its inherently selfish nature. Occult teaching does not advocate forgetting the dead. Rather, it suggests that affectionate remembrance, if properly directed as earnest good wishes for their progress to devachan and peaceful passage through kamaloka, can be genuinely valuable. When wasted in mourning and longing for their return, it is not only useless, but harmful. Hindu Shraddha ceremonies and Catholic prayers for the dead reflect a true instinct. Sometimes, the desire for communication originates from the deceased, when an entity wishes to convey something specific to those left behind. This message may be important, such as revealing the location of a missing will, or often seemingly trivial. Whatever its nature, if firmly impressed upon the dead person's mind, it is desirable for them to deliver it, as anxiety would otherwise perpetually draw their consciousness back to earth life, preventing their passage to higher spheres. In such cases, a psychic who can understand them, or a medium through whom they can write or speak, is truly helpful. The reason they usually cannot communicate without a medium is that one state of matter ordinarily acts only upon the state immediately below it. Since the kamarupa is the densest matter in their organism, they cannot directly induce vibrations in physical air or move a physical pencil without borrowing living matter of an intermediate order from the etheric double, which facilitates impulse transfer between planes. They cannot borrow this from an ordinary person because their principles are too tightly linked. However, the essence of mediumship is the ready separability of principles, allowing the medium to easily provide the necessary matter for manifestation. When a medium is unavailable or unknown, they sometimes make clumsy attempts at communication, using their will to blindly activate elemental forces, perhaps causing seemingly aimless phenomena like stone throwing or bell ringing. A psychic or medium entering a house with such disturbances might thus discover the entity's message and end the disruption. However, this is not always the case, as elemental forces can be set in motion by other causes. For every entity earthbound by the desire to communicate, thousands, if left alone, would never consider doing so. Yet, if the idea is suggested via a medium, they readily respond. Because their earthly interests likely centered on worldly rather than spiritual affairs, it is easy to reawaken vibrations sympathetic to their recently left existence. This undesirable intensification of earthly thoughts is often caused by well-meaning but ignorant friends who seek communications from the departed through mediums, with success proportional to the dangers mentioned previously. It's also crucial to remember that potential harm to the entity itself isn't the only danger. Those who habitually attend seances are almost certain to develop a tendency to haunt them after death, incurring the same risks they subjected their predecessors to. Furthermore, the vital energy for physical manifestations is often drawn from both sitters and mediums, invariably harming the latter, as evidenced by many sensitives' moral or psychic decline, leading to epilepsy, alcoholism, or fraud. The shade, once the separation of principles is complete, the individual's kamaloka life ends, and they transition to the devachanic state. Just as the physical body is left behind upon death, the kamarupa is left behind upon leaving the astral plane. If one has purged all earthly desires during life and channeled all energies into unselfish spiritual aspiration, the higher ego will reabsorb the entire lower manas it projected into incarnation. In this case, the kamarupa left on the astral plane will be a mere corpse, like the abandoned physical body, and would fall into the next class. Even for those with somewhat less perfect lives, a similar outcome can be achieved if lower desire forces are allowed to dissipate undisturbed in kamaloka. However, most people make minimal efforts to shed their less elevated impulses on Earth, consequently dooming themselves to a prolonged astral sojourn and a loss of a portion of the lower manas. This is a very material way to express the mystery of higher manas reflecting in the lower, but it is the closest approximation for those outside initiation. A fairly accurate idea is that the monastic principle sends a portion of itself into the physical world at each incarnation, expecting to withdraw it enriched by experiences at life's end. The ordinary person, however, often becomes so enslaved by base desires that a part of this lower manas inextricably intertwines with kama. When separation occurs after kamaloka life, the monastic principle is, as it were, torn apart, with the degraded portion remaining within the kamarupa. This kamarupa then consists of astral particles that the lower manas could not disengage from, thus retaining it captive. The proportion of each matter level in the kamarupa depends on the extent of manas's entanglement with lower passions. As manas passes through levels, it cannot entirely free itself from each matter, so the kamarupa will show the presence of each grosser kind that retained connection. This gives rise to the shade, an entity not the real individual who is in devachan, but bearing their exact appearance, memory, and idiosyncrasies, often impersonating them at seances. It is unaware of impersonation, believing itself to be the individual, but friends of the departed would be horrified to realize they were deceived into accepting a soulless bundle of all his worst qualities. Its lifespan varies with the animating lower manas, which steadily diminishes, though it retains animal cunning and can communicate by borrowing temporary intelligence from a medium. Its nature makes it highly susceptible to evil influences and incapable of responding to good ones, often serving the purposes of lower black magicians. The manasic matter it possesses gradually disintegrates and returns to its plane, not to any individual mind, thus fading into the next class. The shell, this is simply the astral corpse in disintegration, entirely devoid of lower manas. It lacks consciousness or intelligence, passively drifting on astral currents like a cloud. However, it can be momentarily galvanized into a ghastly parody of life if it enters a medium's aura. In this state, it resembles the departed personality and may reproduce familiar expressions or handwriting through automatic cell action. But any intelligence behind such manifestations is lent by the medium or their guides, not the original entity. More frequently, it is vitalized in another way, discussed next. It also remains blindly responsive to vibrations, usually of the lowest order, that were common during its time as a shade. Consequently, individuals dominated by evil desires attending physical seances are likely to find these desires intensified and reflected by the unconscious shells. Another type of corpse, the etheric shell, exists at an earlier post-mortem stage. After physical death, the kamarupa forms relatively quickly, and the etheric double is cast off, destined for slow disintegration, much like the kamarupic shell later. Unlike the astral shell, the etheric shell does not drift aimlessly. It remains within a few yards of the decaying physical body. Easily visible to even slightly sensitive individuals, it accounts for many churchyard ghost stories. Psychically developed people passing cemeteries see hundreds of these bluish-white, misty forms hovering over graves in various stages of disintegration, a rather unpleasant sight. Like the astral shell, it is entirely unconscious and unintelligent. While it can be galvanized into a horrifying temporary life, this requires loathsome black magic rites best left unsaid. Thus, in successive stages from earth life to Devachan, man sheds 3 corpses: physical body, etheric double, and Kamarupa, all slowly dissolving into their constituent elements and reutilized by nature's chemistry on their respective planes. The vitalized shell, strictly speaking, this entity should not be classified as human, as only its outer vesture, the passive, senseless shell, was once human. The life, intelligence, desire, and will it possesses belong to the artificial elemental animating it, a creation of man's evil thought, but not human itself. This will be discussed more fully under artificial entities. For now, suffice it to say that it is always a malevolent being, a true tempting demon whose evil influence is limited only by its power. Like the shade, it is often used for the horrible purposes of voodoo and obeah magic. Some writers have called it an elementary, but this term has been applied so vaguely to various post-mortem entities that it's better to avoid it. The suicide, or victim of sudden death, an individual abruptly torn from physical life in full health and strength, whether by accident or suicide, finds themselves on the astral plane under significantly different conditions than someone dying from old age or disease. In the latter cases, the hold of earthly desires is weakened, and the grossest particles are likely already shed, so the Kamarupa forms on the 6th or 5th astral subdivision, or even higher. The principles are gradually prepared for separation, so the shock is less severe. In accidental death or suicide, these preparations are absent, and the principle's withdrawal is like tearing a stone from unripe fruit. Much of the grossest astral matter clings to the personality, holding it in the 7th lowest Kamaloka subdivision. This is an unpleasant dwelling, but its impact varies. Victims of sudden death with pure and noble earth lives feel no affinity for this plane, passing their sojourn in happy ignorance and full oblivion, or in a state of quiet slumber, a sleep full of rosy dreams. Conversely, if their earth lives were base, brutal, selfish, and sensual, they, like suicides, will be fully conscious in this undesirable region and prone to becoming terribly evil entities. Inflamed by horrible appetites they can no longer directly satisfy without a physical body, they vicariously gratify their passions through a medium or any susceptible person they can obsess. They take devilish delight in using astral illusions to tempt others into the same excesses that proved fatal to themselves. These are the Pisashas, the incubi and succubi of medieval writings. Demons of thirst, gluttony, lust, avarice, intensified craft, wickedness, and cruelty, provoking victims to horrible crimes and reveling in their commission. This class and the previous one are sources of tempters, the devils of ecclesiastical literature. But their power utterly fails against purity of mind and purpose. They cannot affect a person unless that person has first cultivated the vices they seek to exploit. One with open psychic sight will often observe crowds of these unfortunate creatures around butchers' shops, public houses, or more disreputable places wherever gross influences they enjoy are found, and where they encounter like-minded living individuals. For such an entity, meeting a medium with whom they have affinity is a terrible misfortune. It not only vastly prolongs their dreadful Kamaloka existence, but renews their power to generate evil karma, potentially leading to a degraded future incarnation and the risk of losing a large portion or even all of their lower manas. They must remain on this lowest astral level at least as long as their earthly life would have lasted had it not been cut short. If fortunate enough not to find a sensitive through whom to vicariously gratify their passions, unfulfilled desires will gradually burn themselves out, and the suffering from this process will likely work off much past evil karma. A suicide situation is further complicated because their rash act immensely diminishes the higher ego's power to reabsorb its lower portion, exposing them to numerous and significant additional dangers. However, the guilt of suicide varies considerably based on circumstances, from the morally blameless act of Seneca or Socrates to the heinous crime of one who takes their life to escape the entanglements of villainy, and the post-mortem position varies accordingly. It should be noted that this class, along with shades and vitalized shells, are all what may be termed minor vampires. They seize opportunities to prolong their existence by draining vitality from human beings they can influence. This explains why mediums and sitters often feel weak and exhausted after physical seances. Occult students are taught to guard against their attempts, but without such knowledge, those who expose themselves are likely to be exploited. The vampire and werewolf? These are two more dreadful but fortunately rare possibilities. Though different, they share unearthly horror and extreme rarity, being relics of earlier races. Humanity of the fifth root race should have evolved beyond such ghastly fates, and we are so close that these creatures are often considered medieval fables. Yet, examples occasionally appear, primarily in countries with significant fourth race blood, like Russia or Hungary. Popular legends are likely exaggerated, but a terribly serious substratum of truth lies beneath the eerie stories among Central European peasantry. Their general characteristics are well known. Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla is a typical vampire story, while Isis unveiled Vol. I.P. 454 describes an unusual form. Theosophical readers are familiar with the idea of a life so utterly degraded and selfish that the entire lower manas becomes enmeshed in kama and severed from its spiritual source in the higher ego. Some students mistakenly believe such soulless men are common, but happily, this is untrue. Achieving this appalling preeminence in evil, which involves the complete loss of a personality and weakening of the developing individuality, requires stifling every spark of unselfishness or spirituality and having absolutely no redeeming qualities. Given that even the worst villains often possess some goodness, abandoned personalities are a very small minority. Still, they exist, and from their ranks come the even rarer vampires. The lost entity would soon find itself unable to remain in Kamaloka, irresistibly drawn in full consciousness to his own place, the mysterious eighth sphere, there to slowly disintegrate after experiences best left undescribed. However, if they perish by suicide or sudden death, especially with knowledge of black magic, they may avert this awful fate through a death in life scarcely less awful: vampirism. Since the eighth sphere cannot claim them until after the physical body's death, they preserve it in a cataleptic trance by horribly transfusing blood from other humans via their semi-materialized kamaripa, postponing their destiny through wholesale murder. As popular superstition rightly suggests, the easiest remedy is to exhume and burn the body, depriving the creature of its point d'appui. The unearthed body often appears fresh and healthy, with the coffin frequently filled with blood. In countries where cremation is customary, this form of vampirism is impossible. The werewolf, equally horrifying, results from different karma and perhaps belongs more to the first human division of Kamaloka inhabitants, as it first manifests during a man's lifetime. It invariably implies some knowledge of magical arts, sufficient to project the astral body. When a perfectly cruel and brutal man does this, certain circumstances allow other astral entities to seize the body and materialize it, not into human form, but that of a wild animal, usually a wolf. In this form it roams, killing animals and even humans, satisfying its own bloodlust and that of the fiends driving it. As with the ordinary astral body, any wound inflicted on the animal materialization is reproduced on the human physical body through repercussion. After physical death, the Kamarupa, likely retaining the same form, becomes less vulnerable but also less dangerous, unable to fully materialize without a suitable medium. This century's trend has been to scoff at foolish superstitions of ignorant peasantry. However, as shown in these cases, the occult student often discovers obscure or forgotten truths of nature behind apparent nonsense, learning caution in both rejection and acceptance. Aspiring astral explorers need not fear encountering these unpleasant creatures, as they are exceedingly rare and their numbers are happily diminishing. Their manifestations are typically confined to the immediate vicinity of their physical bodies, as expected from their material nature. The black magician or his pupil after death, this individual is at the opposite end of the spectrum from the Chela awaiting reincarnation. Instead of obtaining permission for an unusual path of progress, this person defies natural evolution by magically sustaining themselves in Kamaloka, sometimes through horrific means. This class could be further subdivided by objectives, methods, and duration on this plane, but as they are not pleasant subjects of study and occult students primarily need to know how to avoid them, it's more productive to move on. It is worth noting, however, that any human entity prolonging its astral life beyond its natural limit invariably does so at the expense of others, by absorbing their life force in some manner. Non-human inhabitants. While it may seem obvious that many terrestrial natural arrangements are not solely for human comfort or advantage, Humanity, particularly in its infancy, probably inevitably imagined that this world and everything in it existed solely for its use and benefit. By now, we should have outgrown this childish delusion and recognized our proper position and duties. That most have not is evident in daily life, especially the atrocious cruelty habitually shown towards animals in the name of sport by many who consider themselves highly civilized. Of course, even the newest student of occultism knows that all life is sacred and that true progress requires universal compassion. However, it is only as studies advance that one discovers the manifold nature of evolution and humanity's comparatively small place in nature's economy. It becomes clear that just as earth, air, and water support countless life forms invisible to the ordinary eye but revealed by the microscope, so too do the higher planes connected to our earth possess an equally dense population of whose existence we are typically unaware. As knowledge grows, one becomes increasingly certain that every evolutionary possibility is being maximized, and that where nature appears to waste or neglect force or opportunity, the fault lies not with the universe's design, but with our ignorance of its methods and intentions. For the purpose of considering non-human astral inhabitants, Leadbeater will exclude the very early forms of universal life evolving incomprehensibly through successive encasement of atoms, molecules, and cells. Beginning with the lowest of what are commonly called elemental kingdoms, he will group an enormous number of astral inhabitants that can only be touched upon briefly, as detailed accounts would inflate this manual into an encyclopedia. The most convenient arrangement for non-human entities is into 4 classes. It must be understood that these classes are not small subdivisions, but typically vast kingdoms of nature, at least as large and diverse as, say, the animal or vegetable kingdom. Some rank considerably below humanity, some are our equals, and others rise far above us in goodness and power. Some belong to our evolutionary scheme, meaning they either have been or will be human. Others are evolving on entirely distinct lines. Before proceeding, Leadbeater notes 2 reservations to avoid incompleteness. First, there will be no reference to occasional appearances of very high adepts from other solar system planets, or even more august visitors from greater distances. As such, matters are unsuitable for a general essay. Besides, it is practically inconceivable, though theoretically possible, for such glorified beings to manifest on a plane as low as the astral. If they chose to, the appropriate body would be temporarily created from this planet's astral matter, as with the Nirmanakaya. Second, entirely separate from the 4 classes, 2 other great evolutions currently share this planet with humanity. No particulars can be given about them at this stage, as it is generally not intended for them to be conscious of humanity's existence, or vice versa. Contact would most likely occur on the physical plane, as their connection to our astral plane is minimal, depending on an improbable accident in ceremonial magic known only to a few advanced sorcerers. Nevertheless, this improbable accident has happened at least once and could again, thus warranting their mention were it not for the prohibition. The elemental essence belonging to our evolution, just as elementary has been indiscriminately applied to various post-mortem human conditions, elemental has been used for all non-human spirits, from godlike divas to formless essence pervading kingdoms preceding the mineral, leading to student bewilderment. For this treatise, Leadbeater restricts its meaning to the latter, denoting the 3 great kingdoms preceding the mineral in our evolution. Earlier adept letters refer to these elemental kingdoms, stating that the first and second are comprehensible only to initiates. Fortunately, this most incomprehensible part does not fall within this manual's scope, as those first and second elemental kingdoms exist and function on the Arupa and Rupa levels of the Devachanic plane, respectively. Therefore, the focus is on kingdom. No, 3, the one immediately preceding the mineral, which is still quite complicated. It contains over 2,400 distinct varieties of elemental essence, each requiring the pupil to instantly distinguish and deal with using specific methods to gain perfect control of astral forces. Phenomena can be produced by wielding only 1 or 2 forces, but adepts take the additional effort to thoroughly understand all of them, using the most appropriate force or combination for scientific accuracy and minimal energy expenditure. Referring to an elemental in this context is misleading, as strictly speaking, no such thing exists. What we find is a vast store of elemental essence, incredibly sensitive to fleeting human thought, responding with inconceivable delicacy in an infinitesimal fraction of a second to vibrations caused by even unconscious human will or desire. The moment it is molded into a living force, a true elemental, by such thought or will, it ceases to be part of this category and becomes an artificial entity. Even then, its separate existence is usually very brief. Once its impulse is expended, it reverts to the undifferentiated mass of its particular elemental essence subdivision. Cataloging these subdivisions would be tedious and unintelligible without practical, visual experience. However, some leading lines of classification can be understood. First is the broad division that gives elementals their name, classification by the type of matter they inhabit. This reveals the septenary nature of our evolution, with 7 chief groups related to the 7 states of physical matter: earth, water, air, and fire, or more accurately, solid, liquid, gaseous, and etheric conditions. Medieval alchemists, often pitied for calling compounds elements, actually possessed broader knowledge. They may not have catalogued all 60 or 70 modern elements, but they didn't apply the term to them, knowing through occult study that only one element existed, of which all matter was a modification, a truth modern chemists are beginning to suspect. Our despised ancestors' analysis was several steps deeper. They understood and observed the ether, which modern science only postulates. They knew it consists of physical matter in 4 distinct states beyond gaseous, a fact not yet rediscovered. They understood that all physical objects contained matter in one of these 7 states, and every organic body incorporated all 7 to varying degrees, explaining their fiery and watery humors as constituent parts. They also knew each order of matter served as an apadi basis of manifestation for a great class of evolving monadic essence, hence the name elemental for the essence. Thus, every solid particle contains an earth elemental, appropriate elemental essence, and similarly for liquid, gaseous, and etheric states. This first broad division is horizontal, representing ascending steps of decreasing materiality. Each of these can be further horizontally divided into 7, reflecting density variations within solids, liquids, and gases. There is also a perpendicular division, harder to grasp, and occultists maintain great reserve regarding its fuller explanation. In each horizontal class and subclass, 7 distinct elemental types exist, differing not in materiality but in character and affinities. Each type reacts on others, creating 7 subtypes within each, colored by the most readily influencing force. This perpendicular division is more permanent and fundamental, as elemental evolution passes through horizontal classes sequentially, but types and subtypes remain unchangeable throughout. A crucial point is that this elemental evolution is on the downward curve of the arc, progressing towards entanglement in matter as seen in the mineral kingdom, unlike most other evolution. This gives it a curiously inverted appearance until its objective is understood. Despite these subdivisions, all elemental essence shares certain properties, though so unlike physical phenomena that they are hard to explain without direct experience. When unaffected by outside influence, a rare condition, it has no definite form, but its motion is rapid and ceaseless. The slightest disturbance, perhaps a fleeting thought current, causes it to flash into a bewildering confusion of restless, ever-changing shapes, forming and disappearing like bubbles on boiling water. These evanescent shapes, often of living creatures, do not indicate separate entities, just as waves on a lake don't imply separate entities. They seem to be reflections from the astral light, generally appropriate to the thought stream that creates them, but almost always with some grotesque or unpleasant distortion. This raises the question of what intelligence selects the shape or its distortion. Since these are from half-conscious, involuntary thoughts, the intelligence isn't from the thinker's mind, nor can it be credited to the elemental essence itself, which is further from individualization than the mineral kingdom. Yet, it possesses a marvelous adaptability, causing it to be described as semi-intelligent creatures of the astral light. Further evidence appears with the artificial class. Good or evil. Elementals always refer to artificial entities or nature spirits. Proper elemental kingdoms have no such concepts. However, a bias exists in nearly all subdivisions, making them more hostile than friendly to humans. Neophytes often first perceive the astral plane as vast hosts of threatening, protean specters that harmlessly dissipate if boldly faced. This distorted or unpleasant aspect is due to this tendency, which medieval writers attribute to man himself. In the Golden Age before this Kali Yuga, men were less selfish and more spiritual. making elementals friendly. They are no longer so due to man's indifference and lack of sympathy with other living beings. The essence's delicate response to our minds and desires suggests that the elemental kingdom is largely shaped by humanity's collective thought. Considering the unelevated nature of this thought currently, it's unsurprising that we reap as we have sown. And this essence, which blindly receives and reflects without perception, typically exhibits unfriendly characteristics. In future races or rounds, when mankind reaches a higher level, the elemental kingdoms will be influenced by changed thought, becoming docile and helpful, as the animal kingdom also will be. Whatever the past, a golden age seems possible if a majority of noble, unselfish men can cooperate with nature's forces. Our ability to influence elemental kingdoms implies a responsibility for how we use that influence. Given their existence conditions, the impact of intelligent creatures' thoughts and desires on them must be a calculated factor in their evolution. Despite consistent religious teachings, most of humanity disregards its responsibility on the thought plane, believing harmless words and deeds suffice, oblivious to the narrowing and debasing influence of their thoughts on others and the unpleasant creations of sordid minds filling surrounding space. A more serious aspect concerning artificial elementals will be discussed later. Regarding the essence, we can accelerate or delay its evolution through our conscious or unconscious use of it. Within this treatise's limits, it is impossible to explain the various uses of forces inherent in elemental essence by a trained individual. Most magical ceremonies rely heavily on its manipulation, either by the magician's will or by evoked astral entities. It is the agent for nearly all physical seance phenomena and most stone-throwing or bell-ringing in haunted houses. These latter results arise from clumsy efforts by earthbound humans to attract attention or mischievous pranks by minor nature spirits. The elemental is never a prime mover, it is a latent force requiring external power to activate it. While all essence classes reflect astral images, some varieties receive impressions more readily, having favored forms. They naturally assume when disturbed, which are slightly less evanescent. Leadbeater warns against confusing elemental essence with monadic essence manifesting through the mineral kingdom. Monadic essence, at one evolutionary stage, manifests through the elemental kingdom and later through the mineral. The simultaneous manifestation of two monadic essence bodies at different stages and one earth elemental occupying the same space as the other, e.g. a rock, does not impede either's evolution or imply a relation between the monadic essence bodies within them. The rock is also permeated by its appropriate variety of the omnipresent jiva or life principle, which is distinct from both essences mentioned. The Kamaripas of animals. This is a vast class, though its members typically remain on the astral plane for a short time, hence its less prominent position. The majority of animals have not yet achieved permanent individualization. Upon an animal's death, the monadic essence manifesting through it returns to its stratum of origin, carrying any advancement or experience gained during that life. This reabsorption is not immediate. The animal's kamic aura forms into a kamarupa, similar to humans, and the animal experiences real astral existence. Its duration, though never long, varies with the intelligence it developed. Most animal kamarupas seem only dreamily conscious but perfectly content. The relatively few domestic animals that have attained individuality, and thus will not be reborn as animals on Earth, experience a longer and more vivid Kamaloka life than their less advanced counterparts, eventually transitioning into a subjective state that can last for a considerable period. An interesting subdivision includes the Kamarupas of anthropoid apes mentioned in the secret doctrine, Vol. I.P. 184 that are already individualized and will be ready for human incarnation in the next round, or even sooner. Nature spirits of all kinds. This class is so diverse that a separate treatise would be needed to do it justice. However, they share common characteristics. These entities differ fundamentally from those previously discussed. While elemental essence and animal kamaripas are non-human, the monadic essence manifesting through them will eventually evolve to manifest through a future humanity comparable to our own. Looking back at our own evolution, we would find we passed through similar stages. This is not the case for the vast kingdom of nature spirits. They have never been, nor will they ever be, members of a humanity like ours. Their evolutionary line is entirely different, and their only connection to us is our temporary shared occupancy of the same planet. While we owe them neighborly kindness, our developmental paths diverge so widely that neither can do much for the other. Many writers include these spirits among elementals, and indeed they are the elementals, or perhaps, more accurately, the animals of a higher evolution. Though more developed than our elemental essence, they share some characteristics, such as being divided into 7 great classes, each inhabiting one of the 7 states of matter also permeated by corresponding varieties of the essence. Thus, there are spirits of earth, water, air, and fire, or ether, definite, intelligent astral entities residing and functioning in these media. It may seem puzzling how a creature can inhabit solid rock or the earth's crust. The explanation is that since nature spirits are formed of astral matter, the substance of rock does not hinder their motion or vision. Furthermore, physical matter in its solid state is their natural element, the one to which they are accustomed and where they feel at home. The same applies to those living in water, air, or ether. In medieval literature, earth spirits are often called gnomes, water spirits are undines, air spirits are sylphs, and ether spirits are salamanders. In popular language, they are known by many names: fairies, pixies, elves, brownies, peris, jinns, trolls, satyrs, fauns, kobolds, imps, goblins, good people, etc., with some titles specific and others indiscriminate. Their forms are numerous and varied, but most frequently human-shaped and somewhat diminutive. Like almost all astral inhabitants, they can assume any appearance at will, but they have definite or favorite forms they wear when not intending to take another. Normally invisible to physical sight, they can materialize when they wish to be seen. They have countless subdivisions or races, with individuals differing in intelligence and disposition just as humans do. Most prefer to avoid humans. Our habits and emanations are distasteful, and the constant rush of astral currents from our restless, unregulated desires disturbs and annoys them. However, there are instances where nature spirits have befriended humans, offering aid, as in stories of Scottish brownies or fire-lighting fairies in spiritualistic literature. This helpfulness is rare. Usually, they show indifference or dislike when encountering humans, or take mischievous delight in deceiving and playing tricks on them. Many village gossip stories from lonely mountainous regions illustrate this. Attendees of physical phenomena, seances will recall instances of practical jokes and silly, though usually good-natured horseplay, which always indicate the presence of lower nature spirits. Their tricks are greatly facilitated by their marvelous power to cast a glamour over those who yield to their influence, making victims see and hear only what these fairies impress upon them, much like a mesmerized subject. However, nature spirits lack the mesmerizer's power to dominate human will, except in unusually weak-minded individuals or those rendered helpless by terror. They cannot go beyond sensory deception, but are masters of that art, capable of glamoring many people simultaneously. Some of the most remarkable feats of Indian jugglers are performed by invoking their aid in this peculiar power, hallucinating the audience into believing they witness events that never occurred. Nature spirits could almost be considered a kind of astral humanity, except that none, not even the highest, possess a permanent reincarnating individuality. Apparently, their evolution develops a much greater proportion of intelligence before permanent individualization occurs, but little is known of their past or future stages. Their life periods vary greatly, some being quite short, others much longer than human lifetimes. We are so distinct from their mode of life that understanding its conditions is difficult, but it appears to be a simple, joyous, irresponsible existence, like happy children in exceptionally favorable surroundings. Though tricky and mischievous, they are rarely malicious unless provoked. As a whole, they share a universal distrust for man and generally resent a neophyte's initial appearance on the astral plane, leading to unpleasant or terrifying first encounters. If the neophyte remains unfrightened, they soon accept them as a necessary evil and ignore them, with some even becoming friendly over time. Some subdivisions of this class are less childlike and more dignified, providing the entities sometimes revered as wood gods or local village gods. Such entities would appreciate the flattery of reverence, enjoy it, and readily offer small services in return. Village gods are also often artificial entities, discussed later. Adepts know how to utilize nature spirits' services, but ordinary magicians can only gain their assistance through invocation, supplication, and bargaining, or evocation compelling obedience. Both methods are highly undesirable, and evocation is extremely dangerous, as it provokes hostility that could prove fatal. No student of occultism under a qualified master would be permitted to attempt such practices. The Devas, the highest known evolutionary system connected with Earth, is that of the Devas, also called angels or sons of God. They are a kingdom above humanity, just as humanity is above the animal kingdom. However, unlike animals, for whom human evolution is the only path, humans reaching a certain high level find various paths open, with the Deva evolution being only one. Compared to the sublime renunciation of the Nirmanakaya, accepting this path is sometimes called yielding to the temptation to become a god. But this implies no blame. It is not the shortest path but a noble one, and if intuition guides one towards it, it is likely best suited to their capacities. We must remember that in spiritual as in physical climbing, not everyone can endure the steepest path. For many, a slower way may be the only option, and we should never despise choices different from our own. However confident ignorance of future difficulties may make us, we cannot know what we will be capable of after many lives of striving. Even those who yield to the temptation to become gods have a glorious career ahead. A separate, entirely evil sense of becoming a god exists in some books, but it would never tempt a developed person and is outside this subject. In Oriental literature, Deva is often used vaguely for almost any non-human entity, including Dian Chohans and nature spirits. Here, its use is restricted to this magnificent evolution. Though connected to Earth, Devas are not confined to it. Our entire seven-world chain is as one world to them, their evolution encompassing a grand system of 7 chains. Their ranks have been primarily recruited from other humanities in the solar system, some higher, some lower than ours, as only a small portion of our own has reached the level to join them. However, it seems certain that some of their numerous classes have not passed through any humanity comparable to ours. We cannot understand much about them at present, but their evolutionary aim is clearly much higher than ours. While human evolution aims to raise the successful portion of humanity to a certain level of occult development by the end of the 7th round, Deva evolution aims to raise their foremost ranks to a much higher level in the corresponding period. For them, as for us, a steeper, shorter path to even more sublime heights is open to earnest endeavor, though those heights are only conjectural for us. Only the lower fringe of this august body relates to the astral plane. Their 3 lowest major divisions are Kamadevas, Rupadevas, and Arapadevas. Just as our lowest body here is physical, the Kamadeva's ordinary body is astral. Thus, they are somewhat in the position humanity will be in on planet F, living ordinarily in an astral body. A Kamadeva would use a Maya Virupa to go to higher spheres, much as we use an astral body. Entering the Karana Shara would be no greater effort for a sufficiently developed Kamadeva than forming a Maya Virupa is for us. Similarly, the Rupadeva's ordinary body is the Maya Virupa, as their habitat is the 4 lower, or Rupa, levels of Devachan. The Arapadeva belongs to the 3 higher levels of that plane and has no closer approach to a body than the Karana Sharara. However, Rupa and Arapadevas manifesting on the astral plane is as rare as astral entities materializing on the physical plane, so they need only be mentioned. Regarding the lowest division, the Kamadevas, it's a mistake to consider them all immeasurably superior, as some entered their ranks from humanities less advanced than our own. Their general average is much higher than ours, as all active or willful evil has long been purged from their ranks. Yet, they vary widely in disposition, and a truly noble, unselfish, spiritually minded human may rank higher in the evolutionary scale than some of them. Their attention can be attracted by certain magical evocations, but only adepts of a certain high class can dominate their will. As a rule, they seem barely conscious of us on our physical plane, but occasionally one becomes aware of a human difficulty that excites pity and may render assistance, just as we might help an animal in distress. However, it is understood among them that interference in human affairs at this stage is likely to do more harm than good. Above the Arapadevas are 4 more great divisions, and beyond the Deva kingdom altogether are the vast hosts of the Dian Chohans, but these glorified beings are beyond the scope of an essay on the astral plane. Though not strictly belonging to any of the defined classes, this is the best place to mention the 4 Devarajas, wonderful and important beings. Here, Deva does not refer to the Deva kingdom but to the 4 elements of earth, water, air, and fire, and their indwelling nature spirits and essences over which these 4 kings rule. Their evolutionary path to such power and wisdom is unknown, save that it certainly did not pass through anything comparable to human evolution. They are often called the regents of the earth or angels of the four cardinal points, and Hindu texts name them the Chatu Maharajas, Dhritarashtra, Virataka, Virspaksha, and Vaishravana. Their hosts are called Gandharvas, Kumbhandas, Nagas, and Yakshas respectively, with corresponding compass points east, south, west, north, and symbolic colors white, blue, red, gold. They are mentioned in the secret doctrine as winged globes and fiery wheels, and Ezekiel in the Christian Bible attempts a remarkably similar description. References to them appear in the symbology of every religion, always held in high reverence as mankind's protectors. The Devarajas are the agents of man's karma during his earthly life, playing an extremely important role in human destiny. The Lipika, the great karmic deities of the cosmos, weigh the deeds of each personality when its principles finally separate in Kamaloka, providing the mold of an etheric double perfectly suited to its karma for the next birth. The Devarajas, commanding the elements of which this etheric double is composed, arrange their proportions to precisely fulfill the Lipika's intention. They also constantly monitor life to counterbalance changes introduced by man's free will and that of others, ensuring no injustice, and that karma is accurately worked out, if not in one way, then another. A learned dissertation on these beings is in the Secret Doctrine, Volume I, pp. 122-26. They can assume human material forms at will, and several instances are recorded. All higher nature spirits and hosts of artificial elementals act as their agents in their stupendous work, yet all threads remain in their hands, and sole responsibility rests with them. They rarely manifest on the astral plane, but when they do, they are certainly its most remarkable non-human inhabitants. An occult student knows that since there are 7 great classes of both nature spirits and elemental essence, there must be 7, not 4, Devarajas, but little is known or may be said about the higher 3 outside the circle of initiation. Artificial entities. This, the largest class of astral entities, is also the most significant to humanity. Being entirely man's creation, it is intimately bound to him by karmic ties, and its influence is direct and incessant. It comprises an enormous, amorphous mass of semi-intelligent entities, as diverse as human thoughts themselves, and practically impossible to classify. The only useful distinction is between artificial elementals created unconsciously by most people and those created with definite intent by magicians. A very small third class consists of artificially arranged entities that are not elementals at all. Elementals formed unconsciously. As previously explained, the elemental essence surrounding us is singularly susceptible to human thought. The effect of casual, wandering thoughts, causing it to erupt into rapidly moving, evanescent forms, has been described. Now we examine its response to definite, purposeful thoughts or wishes. The effect is striking. The thought instantly molds the plastic essence into a living being of appropriate form. Once created, this being is not under its creator's control, but lives its own life, its duration proportionate to the intensity of the thought or wish that brought it into existence. It lasts as long as the thought force holds it together. Most thoughts are so fleeting that their elementals last only minutes or hours, but a frequently repeated thought or earnest wish forms an elemental whose existence can extend to many days. Since ordinary thoughts largely revolve around oneself, the elementals they form hover nearby, constantly prompting a repetition of the idea they represent. Such repetitions, instead of creating new elementals, strengthen the old one and grant it a fresh lease on life. Thus, a person who frequently fixates on a single wish often creates an astral attendant, constantly fed by new thought, which may haunt them for years, steadily gaining strength and influence. If the desire is evil, the impact on their moral nature can be disastrous. Even more impactful for good or ill are thoughts about other people, as these elementals hover around the object of thought, not the thinker. A kind thought or earnest wish for someone's good creates and projects a friendly artificial elemental towards them. If the wish is specific, like recovery from an illness, the elemental becomes a force constantly hovering, promoting recovery or warding off hindrances. It displays apparent intelligence and adaptability, though it is simply a force acting along the line of least resistance, steadily pushing in one direction and exploiting any available channel, like water finding an open pipe. If the wish is a vague desire for general good, the elemental essence, in its plasticity, responds to that less distinct idea, expending its force on whatever action most readily benefits the person. In all cases, the amount of force and its lifespan depend entirely on the strength of the original wish or thought, though it can be nourished and prolonged by other good wishes or friendly thoughts projected in the same direction. Furthermore, like most beings, it seems driven by an instinctive desire to prolong its life, thus influencing its creator to renew the feeling that spawned it. It also influences others. It contacts, though less perfectly. What applies to good wishes also applies in reverse to evil wishes and angry thoughts. Considering the pervasive envy, hatred, malice, and uncharitableness in the world, it is evident that many terrible creatures exist among artificial elementals. A person with spiteful, brutal, sensual, or avaricious thoughts or desires moves through the world enveloped in a pestiferous atmosphere of their own making, populated by the loathsome beings they created. Such a person is not only in a sad state, but also a dangerous nuisance to others, exposing anyone unfortunate enough to encounter them to moral contagion from the abominations they surround themselves with. Envious or jealous hatred towards another sends an evil elemental to hover over them, seeking a weak point to exploit. If the feeling persists, such a creature can be continuously nourished and prolong its undesirable activity. However, it cannot affect the target unless they possess a corresponding tendency that it can foster, a fulcrum for its lever. From the aura of a pure-minded, good-living person, such influences immediately rebound, finding no point of attachment, and by a curious law, they recoil with full force upon their creator. In the creator, they find a congenial sphere of action, and the karma of the evil wish manifests through the very entity they called into existence. Occasionally, an artificial elemental is unable to expend its force on either its target or its creator for various reasons. In such cases, it becomes a wandering demon, easily attracted to anyone indulging in similar feelings, prepared either to stimulate those feelings for strength or to unleash its evil influence through any opening. If powerful enough, it may seize and inhabit a passing shell, using this temporary home to conserve its resources. In this form, it may manifest through a medium, masquerading as a familiar friend to gain influence over people it otherwise could not. This reinforces the importance of strict thought control. Many well-meaning people, scrupulously dutiful in word and deed, consider their thoughts private, letting them run wild, utterly unaware of the harmful creatures they unleash upon the world. For such individuals, understanding the effect of thought and desire in creating artificial elementals would be a horrifying revelation. Conversely, it would greatly console devoted, grateful souls who feel unable to repay kindness. Friendly thoughts and earnest good wishes are as easily and effectively formulated by the poorest as by the richest. Almost anyone, with effort, can maintain a good angel by the side of a loved one anywhere in the world. A mother's loving thoughts and prayers have often formed an angel guardian for her child, undoubtedly providing assistance and protection unless the child possessed no instinct responsive to good influence. Such guardians are often seen clairvoyantly, and some have even materialized to physical sight. A curious fact is that even after a mother enters the devachanic state, her love for her children still living will react upon them, often sustaining the guardian elemental she created on earth until they too pass on. As Madame Blavatsky noted, her love will always be felt by the children in the flesh. It will manifest in their dreams and often in various events, in providential protections and escapes. For love is a strong shield and is not limited by space or time. However, not all guardian angel stories are due to artificial elementals. Many have been the souls of living or recently deceased humans, and rarely devas. This power of earnest desire, especially when repeated, to create an active elemental that forcefully pushes towards its fulfillment, is the scientific explanation for what devout but unphilosophical people call answers to prayer. Occasionally, though rarely, a person's karma allows for direct assistance from an adept or pupil, or even rarer, from a deva or friendly nature spirit. In such cases, the easiest and most obvious form of assistance would be to strengthen and intelligently direct the elemental already formed by the wish. A curious example of artificial elementals' extreme persistence was recently observed by one of Leadbeater's investigators. Many ancient families are believed to have a traditional death warning, a phenomenon predicting the head of the house's approaching demise, usually days in advance. A picturesque example is the white bird of the Oxenhams, a sure presage of a family member's death since Queen Elizabeth's time. Another is the spectral coach that drives up to a certain northern castle when a calamity looms. A phenomenon of this order affects a member's family, a solemn, dirge-like music heard 3 days before a death. Our member, having twice heard this mystic sound and verified its accuracy, and knowing its centuries-old family tradition, sought its occult cause. The result was unexpected but interesting. In the 12th century, the head of the family, a crusader, took his youngest, favorite son with him. The promising youth, whose success was his father's dearest wish, was unhappily killed in battle. The father was plunged into despair, lamenting not only his son's loss but also his sudden death in carefree, not entirely blameless youth. His grief was so profound that he cast off his armor, joined a monastic order, and vowed to dedicate the rest of his life to prayer. First, for his son's soul, and second, that no descendant might ever again face the terrible danger of unprepared death. Day after day, for years, he poured all his soul's energy into this intense wish, firmly believing the desired outcome would somehow occur. An occult student would easily deduce the effect of such a definite, long-continued stream of thought. The knightly monk created an artificial elemental of immense power and resourcefulness for his specific object, accumulating within it a store of force, enabling it to fulfill his wishes indefinitely. An elemental is a perfect storage battery with practically no leakage. Considering its original strength and rare calls to action, it is no wonder it still exhibits unimpaired vitality, warning the old crusaders' direct descendants of approaching doom by repeating the strange wailing music, the dirge of a young, valiant soldier 700 years ago in Palestine. Elementals formed consciously, if such results can be achieved by unaware individuals. A magician who understands the subject and can perceive the precise effects of their actions can wield immense power. Occultists from both white and dark schools frequently use artificial elementals in their work. Few tasks are beyond the capabilities of such creatures when scientifically prepared and directed with knowledge and skill. One who knows how can maintain a connection with their elemental and guide it, regardless of distance, allowing it to act as if endowed with its master's full intelligence. Very definite and efficient guardian angels have sometimes been provided this way, though karma rarely permits such direct interference in a person's life. However, for adepts' pupils who risk attack from forces their unaided strength cannot cope with, such guardians have been given and have proven their sleepless vigilance and tremendous power. Some advanced black magic processes can also create powerful artificial elementals, which have wrought much evil. But, as with the previous class, if these are directed at a person of pure character whom they cannot influence, they react with terrible force upon their creator. Thus, the medieval tale of a magician being torn apart by the fiends he raised is not mere fable but may have a horrifying basis in fact. These creatures occasionally escape their creator's control, becoming wandering, aimless demons similar to some mentioned previously. However, those formed consciously, possessing more intelligence and power and longer lifespans, are proportionately more dangerous. They invariably seek to prolong their existence by feeding vampirically on human vitality or by influencing people to make offerings. Among simple, half-savage tribes, they have often succeeded, through judicious management, in being recognized as village or family gods. Any deity demanding blood sacrifices always belongs to the lowest, most loathsome class of this order. Less objectionable types are sometimes content with offerings of rice and cooked food. Both varieties can still be found in parts of India, and they are likely numerous in Africa. Through nourishment from offerings, and especially vitality from devotees, they can prolong their existence for years, even centuries, retaining enough strength for mild phenomena to stimulate faith, and invariably causing unpleasantness if accustomed sacrifices are neglected. For example, in one Indian village, spontaneous fires alarming in frequency and impossible to attribute to human agency would break out if the local deity didn't receive regular meals. The art of manufacturing extremely virulent and powerful artificial elementals seems to have been a specialty of Atlantean magicians, the Lords of the Dark Face. The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 427, mentions their speaking animals that required blood offerings to prevent them from awakening their masters and warning them of impending destruction. Besides these strange beasts, they created other artificial entities of such tremendous power and energy that some are darkly hinted to still exist today, over 11,000 years after the cataclysm that overwhelmed their original masters. The terrible Indian goddess Kale, whose devotees were impelled to commit the awful crimes of Thuggee and who is still worshipped with abominable rites, might well be a relic of a system that had to be swept away, even at the cost of submerging a continent and losing 65 million human lives. Human artificials, this class, though containing few individuals, has gained disproportionate importance due to its intimate connection with a significant modern movement. It's debatable whether it should fall under the human or artificial main divisions, but despite being human, it is so far removed from ordinary evolution and so entirely a product of an external will that it fits best among artificial beings. Its history begins with the great Atlantean race. While their later days are associated with evil practices, Atlantis' mighty civilization also produced much that was noble, and some of its leaders now stand at the highest peaks of human attainment. Among the lodges for occult study preparatory to initiation, formed by adepts of the good law, was one in a part of America tributary to the divine rulers of the Golden Gate of Atlantis. Despite many vicissitudes and changing headquarters due to later civilizations, that lodge exists today, observing the same ancient rituals and teaching the same Atlantean tongue as a sacred hidden language from thousands of years ago. It remains a lodge of occultists with pure and philanthropic aims, leading worthy students a significant distance on the path to knowledge, granting psychic powers only after rigorous fitness tests. Its teachers are not adepts, yet hundreds have learned through it to set foot on the path to adeptship in later lives. Though not in direct communication with the Himalayan Brotherhood, some among the latter were connected to it in past incarnations and maintain a friendly interest. The chiefs of this lodge, always remaining in the background, have assisted truth's progress. About 50 years ago, despairing at the rampant materialism stifling spirituality in Europe and America, they decided to combat it with novel methods, offering opportunities for reasonable people to gain absolute proof of life apart from the physical body, which science tended to deny. The phenomena themselves weren't entirely new, appearing throughout history, but their definite organization. Their production to order was distinctly new to the modern world. This movement grew into modern spiritualism. While perhaps unfair to hold the originators directly responsible for all subsequent results, they succeeded in converting vast numbers from vague belief to firm faith in some kind of future life. This is a magnificent outcome, though in the opinion of many with broader power and knowledge, it came at too great a cost, with harm outweighing good. Their method was to take an ordinary person after death, thoroughly awaken them on the astral plane, instruct them in its powers, and then assign them to a spiritualistic circle. This spirit guide then developed other departed personalities who in turn influenced seance attendees, developing them as mediums. Thus, spiritualism flourished. Living members of the original lodge occasionally manifested astrally at circles, perhaps still do, but mostly they simply guided those they had put in charge. The movement grew faster than expected, soon surpassing their control, so they are only indirectly responsible for later developments. The intensification of astral plane life in these spirit guides distinctly delayed their natural progress. While the intent was for the good karma gained to atone for this, it was soon found impossible to use a spirit guide for long without causing serious, permanent injury. Some guides were thus withdrawn and replaced. In other cases, when change was undesirable, a remarkable expedient was adopted, creating the human artificials. The higher principles of the original guide were allowed to continue their delayed evolution into Devachan, but the shade they left behind was taken possession of, sustained, and operated upon to appear to its admiring circle almost as before. This was initially done by lodge members, but the arrangement proved irksome, unsuitable, or a waste of force, as did using an artificial elemental for this purpose. So, it was decided that the departed person slated to succeed the late spirit guide would still do so, but would inhabit the predecessor's shade or shell, effectively wearing their appearance. Some lodge members objected, citing the deception involved, though the general opinion was that since the shade was genuinely the same and contained some of the original lower manas, no deception occurred. This was the genesis of the human artificial entity, and it is understood that in some cases multiple such changes occurred without suspicion, though some spiritualism investigators have noted sudden differences in a spirit's manner and disposition after a significant time lapse. The Adept Brotherhood never approved of such entities, though they could not interfere. A weakness in this arrangement is that others besides the original lodge might adopt it, and nothing prevents black magicians from supplying communicating spirits, which they have been known to do. This concludes the survey of astral plane inhabitants. With the reservations noted earlier, this catalog is fairly complete, but Leadbeater reiterates that this treatise merely sketches the outline of a vast subject, whose detailed elaboration would require a lifetime of study. Phenomena of the astral plane. Throughout this manual, various superphysical phenomena have been mentioned and partially explained. Before concluding, it is beneficial to recapitulate and list the most common phenomena encountered by students of these subjects, indicating their usual causes. However, the astral world's resources are so diverse that almost any phenomenon can be produced in multiple ways, allowing for only general rules. Apparitions or ghosts serve as an excellent example, as in common usage, these terms can refer to almost any astral inhabitant. Psychically developed individuals constantly perceive such phenomena. For an ordinary person to see a ghost, one of two things must happen. Either the ghost must materialize, or the person must experience a temporary flash of psychic perception. If not for the rarity of these events, ghosts would be as frequently encountered in our streets as living people. Churchyard ghosts. If a ghost is seen hovering near a grave, it is likely the etheric shell of a recently buried person. Alternatively, it could be the astral body of a living person haunting a friend's tomb during sleep, or even a materialized thought form, an artificial elemental created by the intensity of a person's thoughts about being present at that spot. These varieties would be easily distinguishable by someone accustomed to astral vision, but an untrained individual would likely vaguely label them all ghosts. Apparitions of the dying, apparitions at the time of death are not uncommon and very often represent actual visits by the astral form of the dying person just before their dissolution. However, they may also be thought forms brought into being by the dying person's earnest wish to see a friend once more before transitioning to an unfamiliar state. Haunted localities, apparitions at the scene of a crime are usually thought forms projected by the criminal, who, whether living or dead, especially when dead, perpetually re-experiences the circumstances of their action. Since these thoughts are particularly vivid on the anniversary of the original crime, it is often only then that the artificial elementals created are strong enough to materialize to ordinary sight, explaining the periodicity of some such manifestations. Another point regarding such phenomena is that wherever tremendous mental disturbance has occurred, overwhelming terror, pain, sorrow, hatred, or any intense passion, a very strong impression is left on the astral light. A person with even a faint glimmer of psychic faculty cannot help but be deeply affected by it, and a slight temporary increase in sensibility would enable them to visualize the entire scene, seeing the event in detail as if it were happening before their eyes. In such a case, they would report the place as haunted and having seen a ghost. Indeed, even those without psychic sight often feel unpleasant sensations in such places. Many, for example, feel uncomfortable near the site of Tyburn Tree or cannot stay in Madame Tussauds Chamber of Horrors, unaware that their discomfort stems from dreadful astral impressions clinging to places and objects associated with horror and crime, and the presence of loathsome astral entities that swarm about such centers. Family ghosts. The family ghost, a staple of supernatural stories often associated with feudal castles, can be a thought form, an unusually vivid impression in the astral light, or a genuinely earthbound ancestor still haunting scenes where their thoughts and hopes centered during life. Bell ringing, stone throwing, etc. Another class of hauntings, including bell ringing, stone throwing, or breaking crockery, is almost invariably the work of elemental forces. These forces are either blindly set in motion by the clumsy efforts of an ignorant person trying to attract the attention of surviving friends, or intentionally employed by a childishly mischievous nature spirit. Fairies. Nature spirits are also responsible for any truth in the strange fairy stories common in certain rural areas. Sometimes, a temporary increase in clairvoyance, not uncommon among people in lonely mountainous regions, allows a belated traveler to witness their joyous gambols. Other times, strange tricks are played on terrified victims, and a glamour is cast over them, making them, for instance, see houses and people where none exist. This is often not a momentary delusion. A person might experience a long series of imaginary but striking adventures only to suddenly find their brilliant surroundings vanished, leaving them in a lonely valley or wind-swept plain. However, not all popular legends should be accepted as fact, as gross superstition often intertwines with peasant theories about these beings, as tragically demonstrated by a recent murder case in Ireland. These same entities are responsible for a large portion of physical phenomena at spiritualistic seances. Indeed, many seances are conducted entirely by these mischievous creatures. Such performances can include striking items like answering questions and delivering pretended messages via raps or tilts, exhibiting spirit lights, apporting objects from a distance, thought reading, precipitating writings or drawings, and even materializations. In fact, nature spirits alone, if inclined to the effort, could conduct a seance equal to the most marvelous recorded. While some phenomena might be difficult for them to reproduce, their marvelous glamour could easily persuade the entire circle that these phenomena also occurred, unless a trained observer present understood their arts and could counter them. Generally, silly tricks or practical jokes at seances indicate the presence of low-class nature spirits or humans degraded enough to enjoy such idiotic performances during life. Communicating entities. The number of entities that may communicate at a seance or obsess and speak through an entranced medium is vast. Hardly any class among the diverse astral inhabitants cannot be drawn upon, though after the explanations given, it is understood that the chances of them being from a high class are very low. A manifesting spirit might be exactly what it claims, but the probabilities generally suggest otherwise. For the ordinary sitter, there is absolutely no way to distinguish truth from falsehood, as the capacity of a being with astral plane resources to delude a physical plane person is immense, rendering even the most convincing proof unreliable. If something manifests claiming to be a man's long-lost brother, there is no certainty it is true. If it reveals a fact known only to that brother and the sitter remains unconvinced, knowing the information could have been read from his own mind or from the astral light. Even if it reveals unknown information about the brother, later verified, the sitter still realizes it could have been read from the astral record, or that what is seen is only the brother's shade, possessing his memory without being him. It is not denied that important communications have occurred at seances from entities who were exactly as they claimed. The point is that an ordinary seance visitor can never be certain they are not being cruelly deceived in one of many ways. In a few rare instances, members of the occult lodge that originated the spiritualistic movement have themselves provided valuable teachings through mediums, but these have invariably occurred at strictly private family seances, not public, paid performances. Astral resources. To understand how many physical phenomena are produced, one must grasp the various resources available to a person functioning on the astral plane. This is a complex subject, with necessary restrictions on what can be publicly revealed. It may help to consider the astral plane as an extension of the physical. The idea of matter assuming an etheric state, intangible but purely physical, shows how the two planes merge. In the Hindu concept of Jagrat, or the waking state, the physical and astral planes are combined, with its 7 subdivisions corresponding to the 4 physical matter conditions and the 3 broad astral matter divisions. With this in mind, it is easier to understand that astral vision, or rather astral perception, can be defined as the ability to receive an enormously increased number of different sets of vibrations. In our physical bodies, a small set of slow vibrations is sound, a smaller set of much faster vibrations is light, and another set is electric action. However, immense numbers of intermediate vibrations produce no cognizable result for our physical senses. If all or some of these intermediate vibrations, with their wavelength complications, are perceptible on the astral plane, our understanding of nature on that level could be vastly increased, revealing much hidden information. It is acknowledged that some of these vibrations pass through solid matter with ease, scientifically explaining some astral vision peculiarities, though the fourth dimension theory offers a neater explanation. The mere possession of astral vision would explain many wonderful results, such as reading a closed book. When combined with thought reading and the ability to project currents in the astral light to observe distant objects, many clairvoyant phenomena are explicable even without rising above this level. True, trained, reliable clairvoyance, however, utilizes different faculties belonging to a higher plane and is thus outside the current scope. Accurate prevision also belongs to that higher plane, yet flashes or reflections of it frequently appear to purely astral sight, especially among simple-minded people living in suitable conditions, with Scottish second sight being a well-known example. Another crucial point is that any intelligent astral inhabitant can not only perceive these etheric vibrations, but also, if trained, adapt them for their purposes or initiate them. Astral forces, superphysical forces, and their management are subjects not extensively publicized, though some applications may soon be widely known. It is permissible to outline how certain phenomena are performed. Those with experience in physical spiritualistic seances have witnessed evidence of irresistible force, e.g., instantaneous movement of enormous weights. Scientifically minded observers may wonder about the source and leverage. Several methods exist, but 4 will be hinted at. Etheric currents. First, vast etheric currents constantly sweep over the Earth from pole to pole, possessing irresistible power like a rising tide. Methods exist to safely utilize this stupendous force, though unskillful attempts are fraught with danger. Etheric pressure. Second, there is etheric pressure, analogous to but immensely greater than atmospheric pressure. We are typically as unaware of one as the other, yet both exist. If science could exhaust ether from a space, as it does air, etheric pressure would be as readily demonstrable. The difficulty lies in etheric matter freely interpenetrating all lower states, so physicists lack means to isolate a body of ether. Practical occultism, however, teaches how, bringing tremendous etheric pressure into play. Latent energy. Third, a vast store of potential energy lies dormant in matter, accumulated during the involution of the subtle into the gross. Changing matter's condition can liberate and utilize some of this, similar to liberating latent heat energy by changing visible matter's condition. Sympathetic vibration. Fourth, many striking results, large and small, can be produced by extending the principle of sympathetic vibration. Physical plane illustrations often misrepresent astral phenomena because they are only partially applicable. However, 2 simple facts from ordinary life can clarify this. If a harp string vibrates vigorously, it causes sympathetic vibrations in corresponding strings of other identically tuned harps. Also, soldiers must break step when crossing a suspension bridge, as regular marching would intensify vibrations until the bridge's resistance is overcome, causing it to collapse. With these analogies in mind, remembering their partial nature, it's more comprehensible that one who knows the exact vibration rate, the keynote, of a matter class can, by sounding it, evoke immense sympathetic vibrations. On the physical plane, no additional energy is developed, but on the astral plane, matter is less inert, adding its own living force to the original impulse, which can be multiplied manyfold. Further rhythmic repetition, like marching soldiers, can intensify vibrations to a disproportionate result. Indeed, there is scarcely any limit to the conceivable achievements of this force in the hands of a great adept who fully comprehends its possibilities, for the universe's very building resulted from vibrations set up by the spoken word. Mantras or spells that produce results not by controlling elementals, but by repeating certain sounds, rely on this sympathetic vibration. Disintegration can be achieved by extremely rapid vibrations that overcome molecular cohesion. A still higher, different vibration rate separates molecules into constituent atoms. A body thus reduced to etheric condition can be moved rapidly by an astral current. The moment the force sustaining this condition is withdrawn, etheric pressure forces it to resume its original form. This explains how objects are sometimes brought almost instantaneously from great distances at seances. When disintegrated, they can pass easily through solid substances like walls or locked boxes, making passage of matter through matter, as simple as water through a sieve or gas through liquid in a chemical experiment. Materialization, since vibrations can change matter from solid to etheric, the reverse is also possible, bringing etheric matter into solid form. As disintegration is explained by the former, materialization is explained by the latter. Just as continuous effort is needed to prevent a disintegrated object from reverting to its original form, continuous effort is required to prevent materialized matter from relapsing into the etheric condition. In typical seance materializations, necessary matter is borrowed from the medium's etheric double, which harms their health and is undesirable. This explains why materialized forms are usually confined to the medium's vicinity and constantly drawn back to their source. If kept away too long, the figure collapses, and its matter instantly returns to etheric form and rushes back. Why darkness is required at a seance? The reason why beings directing a seance find it easier to operate in darkness or very subdued light is now apparent. Their power is usually insufficient to hold together a materialized form or even a spirit hand for more than a few seconds amidst the intense vibrations of brilliant light. Seance attendees will have noticed three types of materializations: tangible but not visible, visible but not tangible, and both visible and tangible. The first, most common type includes invisible spirit hands that stroke sitters' faces or move small objects, and vocal organs for the direct voice. In this case, matter is used that cannot reflect or obstruct light, but can, under certain conditions, create atmospheric vibrations perceptible as sound. A variation is partial materialization, which, though invisible to our eyes, can affect some ultraviolet rays, making a more or less definite impression on a camera, resulting in spirit photographs. When insufficient power prevents perfect materialization, the vaporous form of the second class appears, with spirits usually warning not to touch them. In the rarer case of full materialization, enough power exists to hold together a form that can be both seen and touched for at least a few moments. When an adept or pupil needs to materialize their Maya Virupa or astral body, they do not draw from their own or anyone else's etheric double. Instead, they are taught to extract the necessary matter directly from the astral light or even the akasha. Reduplication, another related phenomenon, is reduplication, produced by forming a perfect mental image of the object to be copied in the astral light, then gathering the necessary physical matter around that mold. This requires holding every particle of the object, interior and exterior, accurately in view simultaneously, demanding significant concentration. Individuals unable to directly reduce matter from the astral light have sometimes borrowed it from the original article, which would then lose weight accordingly. Precipitation of letters and pictures. Precipitation of letters or pictures is discussed in theosophical literature and can be achieved in several ways. An adept wishing to communicate might place a sheet of paper before them, form an image of the desired writing, and draw matter from the astral light to objectify that image. They could just as easily produce the same result on their correspondence paper, regardless of distance. A third, more time-saving method is to impress the entire substance of the letter on someone's mind, enabling them to perform the mechanical precipitation. If the pupil found it difficult to simultaneously draw material from the astral light and precipitate the writing, they might use ordinary ink or colored powder already present. The ability to produce precipitation is a dangerous power in unscrupulous hands, as it can easily create forgery undetectable by ordinary means. A pupil connected with a master always has an infallible test to verify whether a message truly emanates from the master or not. However, for others, the proof of origin lies in the handwriting and the spirit breathing through it, which, though seemingly clever, holds no value as evidence. As for speed, a pupil beginning precipitation might only be able to image a few words at a time, making it much slower than ordinary writing. A more experienced individual could visualize a whole page, or even an entire letter at once, completing the task with greater ease. Long letters are sometimes produced in a few seconds at a seance. Precipitating a picture uses the same method, but requires visualizing the entire scene at once, along with all its colors and manufacturing details, to accurately reproduce it. This highlights the scope for artistic faculty. Any astral inhabitant can produce an equally good picture. A great artist in life, having learned how to see and what to look for, would likely achieve more successful precipitation than an ordinary person after death. Slate writing, for which some mediums are famous, is sometimes produced by precipitating, though more frequently it involves the fragment of pencil enclosed between the slates being guided by a spirit hand, barely substantial enough to grasp it, but materialized. Levitation, common in Eastern yogic practices, involves a human body floating in the air. This occurs through neutralizing or reversing gravity's attraction by judiciously using specialized forces. Ancient India and Atlantis possessed knowledge of this, as evidenced by their airships and ability to move massive blocks of stone in Cyclopean architecture. Spirit lights, with knowledge of nature's forces on the astral plane. Spirit lights. Mildly phosphorescent or dazzling electrical varieties, or curious dancing globules of light, a class of fire elementals that transform themselves, are easily produced. Since light consists simply of ether vibrations, anyone who knows how to set up such vibrations can readily produce any kind of light desired. Handling fire unharmed is a remarkable feat generally performed through the etheric elemental essence, though other methods exist. The thinnest layer of etheric substance can be manipulated to be absolutely impervious to heat, allowing a medium or sitter to pick up burning coal or red-hot iron with perfect safety. Transmutation. Most seance occurrences had been discussed, but two rarer phenomena remain: transmutation of metals and repercussion. Transmutation of metals, a medieval alchemist's dream, was often seen as the purification of the soul. There is evidence that it was truly accomplished, and some petty magicians in the East still claim to perform it. Since the ultimate atom is one and the same in all substances, and metals differ only in their combinations, one who possesses the power to reduce a piece of metal to its atomic condition and rearrange its atoms into another form would have no difficulty in transmuting it as desired. Repercussion. The principle of sympathetic vibration also explains repercussion, the strange phenomenon where any injury done to or mark made upon the astral body during its wanderings is reproduced on the physical body. Evidence of this exists in trials for witchcraft in the Middle Ages, where it was often stated that a wound given to the witch, in the form of a dog or wolf, was found on the corresponding part of her human body. The same strange law has sometimes led to unjust accusations of fraud against a medium when, for example, the color of materialized spirit, matter rubbed off on a sitter's hand, later appearing on the medium's physical body. This occurs because the spirit is simply the medium's astral body, or perhaps their etheric double, forcefully influenced by guiding entities to assume another form. Physical and astral bodies are so intimately connected that it is impossible to touch one without immediately setting up exactly corresponding vibrations in the other. Conclusion. It is hoped that this treatise has sufficiently enabled the reader to follow the subject thus far, providing a general idea of the astral plane and its possibilities, helping them to properly place its phenomena within the grand scheme of things, which they can then further explore. Although this sketch is merely a rough outline of a vast subject, it nonetheless highlights the extreme importance of astral perception in the study of biology, physics, chemistry, astronomy, medicine, and history, and the great impetus it can give to the development of all these sciences. However, its attainment should never be considered an end in itself, as any means adopted with that object in view would inevitably lead to what is called in the East the Laukika method of development, a system through which certain psychic powers are acquired, but only for the present personality, and their acquisition is surrounded by no safeguards, making the student extremely vulnerable to misuse. This class includes all systems involving the use of drugs, invocation of elementals, or the practices of Hatha Yoga. The other method, called the Lokottara, consists of Raj Yoga or spiritual progress, and though it may be slower, what is acquired along this line is gained for the permanent individuality and is never lost. Under the guidance of a master, perfect safety from misuse of power is ensured as long as his orders are scrupulously obeyed. The opening of astral vision must be regarded only as a stage in development, leading to an infinitely nobler, very small step on the great upward path which guides man to the sublime heights of adeptship and beyond, to glorious vistas of wisdom and power unimaginable to our finite minds. Yet no one can wish to have a wider sight of the astral plane, for it unveils sorrow and misery, the evil and greed of the world as an ever-present burden. This echoes Schiller's passionate adjuration. Why hast thou cast me thus into the town of the ever-blind, to proclaim thine oracle with the opened sense? Take back this sad clear-sightedness, take from mine eyes this cruel light. Give me back my blindness, the happy darkness of my senses, take back thy dreadful gift. This feeling is not unnatural for one in the earlier stages of the path, yet higher sight and deeper knowledge bring the student the perfect certainty that all things are working for eventual good. For hour after hour, like an opening flower, shall truth after truth expand, for the sun may pale and the stars may fail, but the law of good shall stand. Its splendid glows and its influence grows as nature's slow work appears, from the neophyte at small to the lords of all, through kalpas and kroras of years. Thank you for exploring the astral plane with occult mysticism. Share your thoughts below and join our community. like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more hidden wisdom. Until next time, keep seeking the unseen.